I will declare the Finance Committee meeting of the 1st of August 2019 open, and we'll start with the apologies. I have apologies from Councillor Dave McPherson and Rob Pascoe. Are there any other? Got a couple of laties. We don't want to, does it bother you that not here quite yet? Okay. All right, I'll move the apologies. Can I have a second? Thank you, James. Those in favour, those against, carried. Thank you. Confirmation of the agenda on page 4 or 5. I'll move confirmation of the agenda. I have a seconder. James Casson, thank you. Those in favour, those against, carried. Do we have any declarations of interest? No declaration of interest, thank you. Okay, we're into the public forum. Ray, just...
Oh, we've got to get out of here by lunch.
Yeah. Ray, I think we do them up here, don't we? Yeah. We used to do them up there, but yeah, we've moved up.
It's up to you though, because if no one...
Well,
an elected member might come in.
Yeah.
Might come late.
Okay, Ray, you've got 5 minutes.
Sure.
That includes time for questioning, so if you just leave a little bit at the end for questions. There's a clock up there, which you probably... Oh, there's a clock there, which you can see, although you'll be turning around and look at it. Okay.
Use my peripheral vision.
And there's a 1 minute bell. Yeah.
Oh, 1 minute bell. Oh, good.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And then after that, we count you down to 10.
Thank you, everyone, for giving me the opportunity to speak today. My name is Raymond Mudford. I represent the Ratepayers Association, Resident Ratepayers Association. I've been appointed in May as the president. The topic I wish to speak about today is called democracy. The Hamilton Residents and Ratepayers Association, Inc. observe a serious decline in the delivery of democracy between Hamilton citizens, elected members and staff. We appoint individuals to represent the community and expect that tools are in place to enable our representation to express the will of the community. Considerable concern is being expressed by the community about the poor definition of projects, lack of financial control, and communication with the community about project risks and long-term costs. It is evident from reviewing the 2014 version to the 2019 version of standing orders that committee meeting control has shifted from elected members, the chairperson of elected members, to staff. To empower those who are being called to account to set the agenda and control meeting content is unacceptable and totally destroys the governance relationship. The Finance Committee Chair asking for more clarification on council activities using tools such as cost-benefit analysis is across all industries best practice. If this type of tool was used prior to signing the V8 contract, Clauden's Event Centre and many other cost overrun projects, maybe the community would have a higher opinion than the 32% recently reported. As the President of the Resident Ratepayers Association, I challenge you all to change the standing orders before the 4th of October on meeting agenda notices. Note, in 2010, it was stated as not less than 14 days, not the current 4 days, so that the new leaders of this great city can start their role on a positive footing and assume the responsibilities that the community expects of them, responsibilities not possible under the current standing orders. We recommend that a council community task force that includes an independent governance subject matter expert be set up to undertake a review of the standing orders. Our organisation would be delighted to assist with appointments and development of the terms of reference to facilitate an early result.
Thanks, Ray. Any questions? I heard a yip there somewhere. Oh, there is. Paul, my thing's not.
Good morning.
working. Yeah.
In respect to the standing orders, I was trying to understand what particular part of the standing orders you had most problem with. Was it to do with the lack of time between reports and decision making that gives you most concern because elected members do not have the time to do due diligence? Is that what you were saying? I wasn't quite sure.
There are two elements. That is one of them, which we, if you recall, back in early this year, I think it was February, maybe January of this year, when the time for reviewing material provided to yourselves as councillors was, I think, if I recall, it was 3 days at the time, and it's now been moved to 4 days as part of that consultation. What I'm saying is that prior to that, in 2010, it was actually not less than 14 days. That was one issue. The other issue is the way in which the agenda material is actually assembled, or should I say the decision against the agenda is defined here within council. At the moment, the standing orders put that responsibility with staff rather than with the chair of the committee.
Thank you.
Our opinion is it should be with the chair of the committee.
Thank you.
Thanks, Paula. Martin.
Yes. Is that Hamilton, in terms of your own observation of local government and your colleagues around the country, is this issue unique to Hamilton, or is that something, and I'm talking about the relative role of an elected member versus staff, I'm just asking as a neutral question.
Yeah. My position, I suppose, is that we need to think about Hamilton.
Yeah.
That's our responsibility.
Sure.
What happens elsewhere is not our concern. I guess some of the challenges we have that the LGA are indicating some standards, I suppose you might call it. And my view is that the LGA does not run the council. You as elected members run the council. And you are being paid to do this.
Can I just have a very quick follow-up question? I get what you're saying is, I think your message is about if there's a chair of a committee, that they should certainly have a leeway to put their perspectives and lead issues. Would you obviously also accept that staff also can still give alternative advice?
I don't think there's any issue with that.
Yeah.
It's about the, I guess, the responsibility.
Yeah.
And the responsibility, in my view, and our view, should be with the chair, not with staff.
The buck stops.
Yeah, buck stops with the chair.
Okay. No, thank you.
Thanks, Martin. Ryan, I'm sorry, mate. We've just... All right, I'll pretend I can't hear you. Go.
Thanks, Ray. What's the current membership of the Hamilton Ratepayers Association?
We are currently running at 70 members.
Thank you.
We were 20 2 months ago.
Okay.
Okay, thank you. Yep.
Through you to democracy, if you agree, 14 days for our agendas to be in circulation, as opposed to 4 now, Becca.
You wanted to know if that's actually as it is?
Yeah, back in 2014 when Ray was referring to.
I can't confirm right away because I would need to check that, but I would be surprised if it was 14 days. That's not my understanding with respect to the rest of the councils across New Zealand.
It was 2010.
2010. I can check that, but from my recollection, and I wasn't here at that time, I don't know at this point in time. Maybe some of the other elected members that were.
So can you just report that back to Ray once you do find that information?
Absolutely.
Because I don't think you could run a council at 14 days. It just wouldn't work. So maybe if you can find that information out,
yes,
send it through.
absolutely. And I just wanted to make another point of clarification. A lot of the sections within standing orders are actually required by the LGA, and I'm happy to circulate information to elected members with respect to those sections.
Thank you.
I can provide a copy of the standing orders if you want
Thank you, Ray. Appreciate it. Okay, confirmation of the minutes. So we're on item 5, confirmation of the minutes of the Finance Committee meeting of Thursday, the 23rd of May, 2019. I'll move. Do I have a seconder? Paula, thank you. Those in favour, those against, carried. Okay, item 6, page 13, which is the weather-tight buildings. Corey.
Good morning, councillors. A very straightforward report, I think, first up this morning. With the tightness report, 2 main points that I'd just like to draw to your attention, and that is that in the last 12 months, we have settled 1 weather-tight building claim, and we have 1 new weather-tight building claim. The information is provided in the tables on page 14 for your information on the claim summary, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
That no one's bothered with it. Well done. Okay, is there any discussion? Oh, sorry, you just popped up. Yes, Angela.
Thank you. I'm interested, Corey.
Marvellous, thank you.
I just have a question, Corey. On page 14, and it was interesting looking at the settlement amounts, where sometimes council carries the majority of the cost, and sometimes the other parties carry the majority of the settlement cost. Does this table include other costs associated, like any external reports that we had to do or legal costs that we've used?
No, the table I think that you're referring to, councillor, is solely the settlement amounts themselves. So that's the amount of quantum is on the right hand column,
yes.
Which is a total claim, and then that is the amount that we've paid to settle it.
Okay, I'd be interested, even if it was just through an email, to see on each of those lines circulated what the total cost in terms of legal on top of that was to council.
So each of the years?
For the years, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, if no hurry with that. My second question, there's a variety of, as I said, of where council's the majority settler and where external party is. How difficult is it through that process to determine that, or do we just sort of leave that up to the process and the lawyers?
Sorry, can you say that question again, sorry?
In terms of what my first comment, Corey, when I started out, where there's a variety of where council's the majority settler and where the external parties are the majority settler. How difficult is that to determine through the process, or is that something that we just simply leave to the process and the lawyers?
First and foremost, I guess our initial approach is to try and do alternative dispute resolution to start with. So through that process, we'll get the parties around the table in either mediation or adjudication, and through that process, we'll facilitate, I guess, a conversation around where we think the liability sits or what our exposure is as individual parties. So through that process, we'll determine involvement from different parties, including how solvent those parties are and what their contribution is. And so that goes towards setting the scene of where the value of contribution, I guess, sits. So it's individual on each case. And some of these cases where you'll note we have paid more than some of the other claimants, could be that they've gone into liquidation throughout the process, or it could be that their involvement has been rather limited in the overall picture of the claim.
Okay, great, thank you.
Martin.
Yes, I noticed in terms of the chart, we're still obviously way below, the high growth councils. Can you just remind us why that should be, and are we expecting any, more to
Sure. So yes, you're quite right. In the bottom chart there, it does show our relativity, if you like, to other metros. That's made up of a number of reasons. In part around the type of construction that we have and the materials that we use. But we're also very lucky in Hamilton, being such a small community, that we've got a lot of good builders, and reputations are very important to our industry in Hamilton. So in part it's around the type of development, but also around the construction methods and reliability of our contractors.
I mean, anecdotally, you know, you read about a sale, or there's some premises that we thought were new near the lake, and suddenly next day they're totally all gone.
Yep.
Have we, you know, all I want to do is get an idea, is there any others predictable that are in the wind, particularly because we've gone for high, you know, particularly some of the high density areas? I mean, if I'm right, have we escaped largely the single dwelling bungalow issue, but is the issue around some of our high density?
It's really hard to try and establish. The one pertinent note is, I guess, we have a 10-year statutory limitation period, so that gives us some ability to try and reflect, if you like, on the types of development that we've done in that period of time. It's not necessarily just down to typology of building, as you mentioned, but also the type of products that are used. One of our biggest challenges in New Zealand is around our certification regime for product type, and so it's often difficult for us to try and establish whether we are likely to have any further leaky buildings, or whether we've currently got any out there. So, yeah, not able to give you a definitive answer, I guess.
I guess follow-up question, given over the last 5 or 6 years, you know, with the combination of district plan and the economy, there's been an absolute ramp up of, you know, the high density type dwelling.
Yes.
What do we do now that was different? I mean, obviously there's national regulations, but I'm just trying to work out what we do now in the hope that we don't suddenly have any tsunami in 10 years' time.
Well, I guess the two biggest changes that I can put on the table has been around the treatment of timbers to start with. So that was one of the leaders in leaky buildings, was when we moved to untreated timbers. But also the changes in the code in 2004 that came in 2005 around having cavity systems. So I guess the saying is that all buildings leak. It's a matter of whether they can breathe and whether the moisture can get out. And so the change in development type through the codes and standards have assisted the ability to monitor buildings in a better way.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks, Martin. Thanks, Corey. All right, I will move the report be received. Mark Bunting. Those in favour, those against, carried. Thank you. Okay, next item, item 7, Capital Portfolio Monitoring Report, page 17. I understand this may be the last time we see your smiling face, so keep smiling.
Kia ora, councillors, Mayor Andrew and Mangai Bella. For those who don't know me, my name's Chris Barton. I'm the Capital Projects Manager here at Hamilton City Council, and with me is Natalie Young, our PMO Manager. I propose today to take the Capital Monitoring Report as read. However, I'd just like to highlight a couple of the key components within the report today. So firstly, I note that the report does not provide a full financial breakdown of the program for the 2018-19 financial year to a project level. This was to ensure accuracy of the financial information when it does come to committee, as the short time between the end of financial year and this committee meeting has meant some of the information there is preliminary. We just wanted to make sure that's true and accurate before it does come to this committee meeting. A full report on the 2018 financial year will be provided to the next committee meeting on the 10th of September, and will include details of any proposed capital movements at that time. I'd also like to bring attention to the summary document from pages 31 to 40, which outlines some of the key outcomes and achievements across the capital portfolio over the last 12 months. So the purpose of that document is to provide a visual summary for committee and also potentially the community as well regarding some of the key outcomes that have been delivered over the capital portfolio over the last 12 months. I'd also like to note, as outlined on page 26 from paragraph 95, is an explanation of the difference between project budgets and approved contract sums. This was previously requested to come to the committee, so I'll leave that there and happy to take any questions when it gets to it. Also note on page 28 is a discussion regarding the proposed Central City River Jetty. Note a decision regarding this item is proposed in the Financial Strategy Monitoring Report, and there's also a contract award paper later in the meeting as well. So other than that, I propose to take the report as read and happy to take any questions.
Look, it's just a little minor one. Page 36 on our agenda, citywide community, the playgrounds you've got open, you've actually missed one of the playgrounds, the Masters Ave Hillcrest Park one. You've got Hillcrest Stadium, but Hillcrest Park isn't in there as well.
That's a renewal. So it's citywide community is all about the development of the playground, the new playgrounds, whereas that was a renewal. So that's covered in the should be covered off in the renewals and compliance area.
Oh, my apologies.
Yeah, new upgrades. I think we put it in.
Yeah, I couldn't find it.
So there's just this minor difference between the two, but yeah.
Oh, yeah, okay. Thank you. That's all I had. Yeah.
Thanks, Chair. This will be a question to maybe either Lisa, maybe Chris, actually, or you guys. You can choose. Page 23, I've just got a couple of questions just for, so I can get my head clearer around our ICMPs. So we are in one of the graphs somewhere in here. Hang on, let me get organised. Okay, first of all, first question is, how long before they'll all be completed? Because we've got 7, I think. And it is for you, Chris.
Yep.
Thanks.
So roughly it's a long program to complete all the ICMPs,
Yeah.
something like 10 years from memory.
Yeah.
Previously we'd brought to council, I think, the priority order of the ICMPs we're doing. It does move around quite a bit depending on the development and our engagement with developers. Some areas are moving ahead quicker. We sort of put more focus on developing the ICMPs in that area. So it is a little bit dynamic, but it won't be for 10 years until we've got them all complete.
Okay. Chris, well, do we need to, I'm thinking about some of the issues that are on the news today, or discussion about water that's on the news today. Are we going to have to put in, or can we put in more resources to get that work done faster in the event of this looming legislation from government on, they've already indicated what they want to do with drinking water, still early days, but in terms of stormwater and wastewater, which is stormwater infrastructure, which is what these ICMPs cover?
Yeah, so probably a couple of answers to that. So you're quite right. The recent announcements about drinking water and not so much stormwater. Yeah. But stormwater is very much front of mind as well in terms of healthy rivers and all of the policy issues around here. I think to give councillors assurance, I think we're ahead of the ball game, and the ICMPs we're doing are really good in anticipating all of the issues that are coming up. The other point is I think we've tapped out the market in terms of resources to do ICMPs. So to throw more money at it, I don't think we can probably go faster than what we're doing now. So they are really intensive and resource hungry bits of work, and you need to do them properly, and there's lots of engagement.
Okay.
So I think we're going really fast. I think it'll be difficult to go faster, and if we threw more money at it, I'm not sure.
It's not going to help?
I don't think it would help.
Okay, all right. And at some point in the future, and forgive me if I've missed a briefing, the two completed plans that we've got so far, in terms of, I've tried to have a slight read of them. Have we had a briefing on those in terms of what are the high-level issues that have come out from those two plans, or can we have, obviously the new council, because this is just such a massive issue that we're going to have to deal with in the future?
Look, I think it's a very good suggestion probably for the new council, and in terms of induction, we're thinking about that as well, because like stormwater is a really big issue for every council going into the future.
Yeah.
Our history is that we haven't dealt with stormwater really well. I think we're in a position now, a leading position in anticipating healthy rivers and some of the treatment requirements. So it is complex, and I think it would be a really good idea early on in the new triennium to have a very comprehensive briefing about all aspects of stormwater.
Yeah, okay, great, thank you. Second question, I think, Chris, you can sit down. And this one will be to, okay, I'm on page 28, just under the Central City Jetty, just so I'm clear on where the money is and where the money's coming from. The 1.25 million that we had in, we're in the new financial year, so we're talking the 2017-18 annual plan, I think it was, the 1.25 million. So the 55 million that's in on this document under 2018-19 is left over from that 1.25, is that correct? Or 550,000 that's in here, is that still remaining from that 1.25?
Yes, that's correct.
Yeah. And then so the, however much it is, the 500, sorry, I'm getting confused here. So the 460,000 is remainder from that annual plan budget 1.25. The remainder of that has been spent to date on design work, detailed design works, consultancy, etc. So in terms of hard infrastructure, we've got the 550,000 from last financial year. Then you're bringing forward 460,000 into this financial year to top it up to the million. Yes?
So we're requesting an additional $500,000.
Yep.
We have left over 460,000, so we have 960,000 to fund the construction.
Yes. Sorry, so the 460,000, you're not bringing it forward from a future year. That's left over from the purchase of the Victoria Street buildings.
No, the 460 is left over from the 1.25 that you're talking about.
Oh, okay, all right. Okay, and I think that's my last question. Yes, thank you.
Coming back to the page on key risks, and perhaps that's referring to our GM in terms of particularly NZTA, and also the other point about the what you call the supply and demand around contracts and price in terms of. Could you perhaps outline when is the kind of earliest we can get those signals that things are not looking good? I'm thinking particularly of NZTA, because, we make assumptions in our planning, right? And then suddenly, as Chris Allen said, the National Land Transport Fund is oversubscribed or the board's going somewhere else. Chris, have you got is there anything else we can do? Because it seems to me, we are making assumptions on some of our major capital projects subject to.
Yep, so councillors will recall we came to them a little while ago with the funding advice from NZTA. So what NZTA had been through our whole program and indicated which projects were likely to get funding and which projects were unlikely to get funding because their view would there just wouldn't be enough funding in the appropriate category to fund them. So we've had that advice, and we had a a decision on that, and some of the projects, they gave us the funding to keep developing the projects to a point where we could go and ask for funding, because the funding situation could change at any time. I think we also indicated that the core issue is there's not enough funding in the system to deal with the projects that people want to do up and down the country, and the what they call the government policy statement on transport funding is the key policy document that we need to get involved with. So they're putting out a draft one by December this year, 2019, for the period 2021 onwards. So we indicated in the report to council that's a serious bit of policy that we need to be involved in, and advocate for the funding that we need to do the things that we want to do for the city.
So
up until then, it's just keep progressing the projects and go and ask for the funding, because if one big project slows down in Auckland, there could be funding to become available.
So in terms of the sort of the LTP process and the APs, obviously you'll be giving whoever's the council, around the council, mayor's chair and all of that stuff, you would anticipate an update report coming in late January, February, would you, on that basis?
Yeah, absolutely. We've got a radar on this. The mayor sent a letter, was invited to send a letter to the New Zealand Transport Agency in regard to the funding letter we had. One of the key points the mayor made is that the agency needs to better align the timing of their decisions with our decisions.
Right.
So when we get to the next 10-year plan, we don't want the same situation where we've gone into it and given our community an expectation there will be funding available, just to find out that there's not. So that was one of the mayor's key submission points. Can they work to get the timing more aligned, so there's more confidence if they say there's funding available, that will be for the next 3 years.
And just a final quick question, if I may, and this is a hard one. If we're talking about whether it's, if we're talking about major projects, stormwater, all the other things we do, and being able to predict the supply and demand, the cost of projects, we have assumed a global cost of X, but suddenly we find the trend lines we're going to predict, and if we're planning to start something in year 2 or year 3 of a 10-year plan cycle, actually it's going to be X plus 3 million or whatever, purely because we're getting some senses about just surely supply and demand. In other words, pressure on resources, which means the equilibrium price goes up.
Yeah, my answer to that is every 3 years when we do our 10-year plan, we have a good look at that, and we try and forecast escalation and cost increases, and part of that is what the market's going to do. So for the last 10-year plan, you might recall that we put a extra, what we call escalation, in the first 3 years, because we had a view that the market in Waikato was going to be quite tight with lots of work and prices going up, so we did have an allowance for that. But we do that every 3 years and build that into our 10-year plan, so rest assured we're almost starting the lead up to the next 10-year plan, and there'll be a lot of thought go into that, and just what we think is going to be happening, if I understand your question properly.
That's it. Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks, Martin.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. In respect to the key risks on page 27, oops, I've just lost it. Hang on, sorry. Under the paragraph 110 to 115, just a couple of questions there. It seems that we're being hit quite a bit by the increasing costs of contract work, and I'm wondering what is the solution to that, because both contract resources, professional services talk about the high demand for consultancy and resulting in price tension and associated cost escalation. Do we have any control over that? And then related to that, if I just, you're talking about project pipeline visibility or pipeline visibility. Can you explain to me how that sits within the asset management plans that we already have and the long-term plan? We do have a fairly long timeline, so what does that mean in relation to that, please?
So in terms of the risks regarding contract resources and professional service resources, at this stage, a lot of that is risk. We are seeing escalation in the contracting industry and pressure in professional service environments, but a lot of that is a risk factor at the moment. It hasn't necessarily been realised in terms of tender pricing. We're still getting good competitive tenders coming through, but there is still an enhanced risk profile moving forward with the industry moving forward. So that is still in that risk category rather than being realised. In terms of pipeline visibility, what that is yes, we do have a lot of information in terms of our 10-year plan and asset management, activity management plans. What that is around making sure that we're communicating that with the industry and in the best easily digestible formats for them. So in terms of sitting down with the contracting industry and giving them visibility of what's coming up over the next 12 months, 24 months, 36 months, so that they can start preparing and making sure we're proactively delivering that information, and same in terms of professional service environments. So it's taking the information we've already got, but just how we go and communicate that with the industry in a more, I guess, easily digestible manner for them.
Thank you. And one of the things that you have in the treatment plan is recent retendering of LAS. How is that beneficial? I mean, what did that achieve? Just what was that for?
So there's a report coming later on in the meeting today around the LAS professional service panel retendering. So we can address it there. But that was that we had an existing professional service panel contract which secured us professional service resourcing over the last 5 years, and that's come to the end of its term. So that's been really successful for us in terms of securing effective professional service panel resources over the last 5 years, and so we've been through a retendering process for that. So if that wasn't, if that retendering didn't happen, or we had some, that would provide significant risk to us in terms of delivery of our professional services moving forward.
Okay, thank you. And one final short question on the Central City Jetty, which I was a little bit disappointed to see exactly how much more expensive that piece of work is going to be. So my question is, why do we think that our assessment of what the potential cost for a new jetty might be, why were they so far off the mark? I mean, it's a fair whack off the mark. It's $500,000. So we know that the river is, I'm not trying to dump anybody in it, but, you know, obviously I was a bit surprised because I thought we were tracking along really well and there'd be some movement, but not such a massive difference. Can anybody explain to me why that is? And I just don't want the engineering technicalities. I want to understand how we were too, obviously way too conservative in that environment.
So to answer that, Natasha, Ryan's going to...
The report to Council on the 19th of April was based on very preliminary design, and at that point we did say that it was subject to further design. We took the advice that it would be reasonable to assume the cost would be similar to the Hamilton Gardens, and as it turns out that the pile sizes need to be a lot larger because of it's a different ground condition. So the work that's done in that space, the piles then dictate the barge, and there's also significant impact around the lack of competition around getting a barge because the America's Cup, nobody really wants to release one. So it is proving to be mostly around that area.
So a lot of that cost overrun is the availability and the price on a barge?
And the piling, yeah. And the knock-on effect of the piles as well. Yeah.
Okay, and I don't necessarily think you could answer it on the spot, but I just want to find out if there are any cheaper ways of building pontoons/jetties, because I'm sure other people have been told this, but there are other methods. There's floating and chained jetties, ones that aren't piled at all, but kind of chained to the bank, if you like. That's a bit simplistic.
Yeah.
But are there any cheaper ways of doing the work? Because, you know, I can just see this going later and later and later and having no jetty by summer there.
So I'm aware of that option and have asked the engineers to look into whether that one would work on the river. and there were some questions around whether that will work given the 4-metre height difference. It possibly could be engineered and resolved, but I'm not convinced that we'd get a significant cost saving because the cost will be translated into the landside works as well. But admitting the barge issue is still a significant matter. We just need to look into that one further.
And we're still engaged in conversations with potential funders, for example, the Donny Trust, etc.
So at present, the Donny Trust Fund has been committed to our share of the Provincial Growth Fund, and as you know, we still haven't heard on where that's at, so we can't make use of that at this point in time.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thanks, Chair, for indulgence. Just want to start at 28, the Te Awa Cycleway. I noticed that there's a potential delay there due to Waikato and Waipa Council sorting out some land acquisitions. Any idea, have they given us an indicative idea on the length of that delay? Because that will affect our budgeting big time.
Yeah, so I think they're hoping to resolve it by over the next 3 to 4 months. So what that means for us from a funding decision perspective is potentially by Christmas time we're hoping to have
okay. So you're not talking years yet?
No, I don't think it's years. What it does impact on us is obviously we're planned to go and construct that this upcoming summer construction season, because obviously working in that environment we want to be making the most of the summer to build that.
Yep.
So subject to the funding decision from the agency, we've got our design almost there, ready to go. So we're just waiting on that funding decision basically to get in and go and build it.
Yeah, I was wondering about, can I just dig into the discussions on that a little bit? Have we pushed back on that? Because really, you know, what happens out in Cambridge, etc., doesn't affect the benefits that brings to the city?
Yeah, so the challenge with this section is that obviously it is a continuous path, and the path that we're building gets to our city boundary, and then some of the issues are just beyond that. So it is closely linked to the city section of the path and part of that same network. So it is an integral linkage. Chris might have some more detail.
And Chris won't know, but we were in a meeting with the NZTA the other day about all of our portfolio projects, and we're asking that question, like, can we just go as a separable portion, getting a funding decision just to build ours? So we've put a strong view that we would like to build ours this summer. We think it does connect up mostly with our network, so it would still be a good, worthwhile cycle path. So we are pursuing that and pushing that as hard as we can to see whether we can get our funding decision ahead, because we would just like to build it and not wait and have a design in the drawer that gets stale. So we'd like to build it quickly.
Thanks, that's what I wanted to hear. Great, thank you.
Just quickly, probably again for Natasha, mindful that this is a cost and not wanting to talk about frilly additions, but in terms of the aesthetics, is there going to be some value engineering here to design some infrastructure that looks the part, or is it going to be a hickory aluminium extension? Bring it back.
I would,
sorry.
with respect to the jetty, and I would say aesthetics are always an individual thing. As an engineer, some things you might consider hickory I might quite like. The River Plan Task Force did look at putting art on that, and there was a discussion about using some of the Donny Trust Fund for that purpose. So that is still being considered. It is, we have had some landscape and architectural advice on how to make it look more attractive without unduly adding any cost to it, but it is not overblown in my mind. So it is still reasonably simple, but hopefully elegant.
Good answer. Thank you.
What was the initial cost for the jetty? It's the $500 is $500,000 is almost double the price, isn't it?
So the original budget was $550. Yes, you're correct.
So without belabouring the point, how can we get it that wrong? I mean, you guys, this won't be the first jetty someone's built.
Correct. And the last jetty we built was 550.
So the
Yeah.
prep work just wasn't adequate.
Well, I mean, at the point that we took that to council, it was based on a very preliminary design. I have looked at ways to value engineer it too.
So should there be a process whereby perhaps we do a bit more work before we ask for council decisions?
The problem is that we invest in the design and the consenting process in order to resolve some of those risks, and in doing so, you know.
Sorry, you're
you are-
fading away to me.
Sorry. In working through the design and the consenting process, you are investing money in a particular option, and at the point that I brought that to council, I didn't feel it was appropriate to spend money on something that you may not approve, so that's why it went in that form.
So, but you knew there was going to have to be piles, you knew that sort of stuff. That was, no matter whether it was huckery or not, that was always going to have that, wasn't it? And
Yes.
that's what I think you're saying has blown it out.
It's made them, yes, it's the bulk of the change in the cost. And bearing in mind that just getting the barge to site has quite a significant cost as well. Which,
Okie dokie. All right, you can sit down now. Hang on. Yeah, well, I think Natasha's just getting some advice, which we she might.
pointing out at the time that we brought that to council, we did not know how long the gangway needed to be in order to get out to and so that, you know, the length of the gangway and the depth that it needs to go to has an impact. I would say, you know, we did get engineering advice, we did get confirmation that the costs looked right, so it does boggle the mind somewhat.
So just to further that point, often at the time that projects are brought in through the 10-year plan process, different projects are at different stages of the development as well. So often, like, the budgets were allocated largely in the 10-year plan process, and the preliminary estimates were preliminary designs and based on previous jetty construction in the area. Obviously, getting into some of the site-specific details of this specific site has been one of the key drivers of why the costs for this particular jetty have been larger than what was originally anticipated in the 10-year plan. So it's a process of some of the timeframes of some of the design development and the stage of design development of when it's coming through that 10-year plan process when the budgets are set as well.
But it's always one-way traffic, isn't it? It's always going up. Nearly always. Okay, thank you. On page 17, just at the summary, we're told that we had a budget of $250 million capital budget. We've managed to deliver about 60% of that, which is going to be part of our carryover and all that sort of stuff. The money's all, you know, but are we able to deliver this stuff? And this is part of the new process we've got, the portfolio type process, I understand that. But this is one of our biggest capital budgets ever, and this would be one of our biggest carryovers ever, meaning there's a shed load of stuff to be squeezed in.
Yep, and as outlined previously, part of last year has been going through a lot of work in regard to design processes, getting contracts procured, and we've got a whole suite
But didn't you do that last year for this year? So we're just getting the same thing over and over.
So we now, so the design process was last year. We've now got contracts in place to go and deliver a lot of those works. So a lot of that money is now contractually committed. We've got contractors on the ground physically building things. A lot of the money is just around the cash flow across financial years of things that are contractually committed and actually getting built at this time. We've got, there are still new things coming up in the pipeline as well, but there is a significant proportion of that program moving forward which is contractually committed, which gives confidence to continue to deliver moving forward and continue to spend what we've got allocated.
It does kind of create a false picture when we get to our financials, I think, and stand to be corrected by this, in that we haven't spent that money where we thought we were going to, and so we're projecting our debt out for 10 years and all that sort of carry on, where, that really mucks around with that sort of stuff. It must do. It makes our debt look like it's a lot better than it is because we haven't delivered projects on time.
Yeah, I guess the transparency for elected members is through the Financial Strategy Monitoring Report, where we update that every Finance Committee. In saying that it provides additional debt capacity, you would think in this fiscal year, but it takes away from future years in terms of debt capacity. So cash can only be spent once. So it does play around with the debt to revenue and the debt graphs, but the total amount to be spent doesn't change unless approved by this council.
Or it costs more to do the piles for the jetty than we thought. Yeah. Okay. All right, on page 18, paragraph 10, there's a thing called deferred revenue for $24 million. Sorry, I can't remember what that is.
So that relates to obviously deferred capital expenditure projects, those ones that attract particularly NZTA subsidy
So it's
revenue.
third-party money that we're not going to receive because we're behind on our projects.
Yeah, so it's just the revenue related to the expenditure, correct?
Okay, thank you. Just talk about, on page 19, we're talking about the Te-Awa bike ride and things like that. I'm getting increasingly, I'm increasingly getting comments from people about just our walkway on the river, which has been closed for yonks. Is there any update on that?
Yes, so that is progressing through an NZTA business case process to progress the design and construction of that. The design is progressing, and we're confident, or we're hopeful of an approval to get on with those works in the upcoming summer season.
So you're reasonably confident that I can say to people that there will be work being done this summer?
That's what our current program is, subject to NZTA funding approvals at this stage.
Okay, so we haven't got approval from NZTA?
Correct.
Okay. All right. Is there any reason why that's been left for so long? And maybe it's just us not putting a priority on it, I'm not sure.
When it came up, it was dependent on NZTA funding, so we've had to take it through that process to get it underway.
But how long has it been closed for?
About 2 years. Yep.
Okay, thank you. Okay, thank you. Are there any more questions? There are. Martin's back in again.
Yeah, look, this is probably to the GM, it's a general issue, and I think we'll take the jetty as an example, just tell me if I'm wrong here. So obviously you have the mayor of the day, right? I'm looking about a whole LTP. So under our current legislation, the mayor of the day leads the LTP process. So essentially the mayor of the day puts a series of his or her proposals, a proposed LTP, and obviously to all of council, and then when it goes out to the public, it becomes a council product, all right? But I'm just going right back, and you know, the problem you have about some estimates of cost and on a kind of a back of an envelope versus as we get into the detail, and I don't know if there's any, it seems to me that at the very front end there, when the advice has been given to the mayor of the day, how sort of precise can we be in terms of some of the cost of those projects? And I'm just talking about, you know, the beginnings of a budget cycle.
Yeah, I think it depends on how soon that project is scheduled to be constructed or delivered in the 10-year plan. So obviously something that is 5 years away is very difficult to predict. It's also relating to the complexity of the project and the unknowns, and sometimes you just don't know what it's going to cost until you get into it. So staff do their best job to bring to the table the best estimate of the time, but that's never going to always be right.
But in terms of a comms strategy generally, and I know you don't always get this right, as to if I'm looking at a project, you know, there's a huge big asterisk by it, so I know that this one is the best guess, literally, and we can pass it an envelope of money, but it's subject to whole lot of other things, which maybe ultimately the project could be abandoned because the best guess wasn't good enough.
Well, and I think that's the beauty of bringing all the information to elected members when we have that information, so that you can focus on what the outcome is you would like to deliver for the city and what the cost is going to be. And sometimes you might abandon something when you find out that it's going to cost a lot more. Other times you might say this isn't a matter of cost, this is a matter of delivering social outcomes.
Could I just add, Councillor Gallagher, so just support the comments of my fellow GM there. Like every 10-year plan, we are charged with looking into the future and trying to estimate accurately the cost of projects. And we put a lot of effort into that to try and get it right. I just want to bring some context to the debate. Most of the time we get it right. This council is very good at the costing and delivering projects on cost. And some are going to be over and some are going to be under. But in general, we do really well. If you look at our ring roads and all of our other big projects, Western Interceptor, that's come in substantially under. So it does swing both ways, but on balance, I think this council is really good at a portfolio or a portfolio level of the costs of projects. But there's always, the jetty is just one example. We trying to do it without information. Our job is to tell you what we think it is, go away and do some work, and if the cost increases, like the jetty, we bring it back to council to say we now understand it. Do you still want to go ahead? So you still have a decision to make whether you want to proceed or not with the information. Now, whether we've done it at the beginning and done more investigation or done it this way, it would have been a cost to do the investigation, and you'll be in the same position. Do you want to go ahead or not? So, but just my point is the context. Generally, we do really well in this area as a council.
Thank you. Yep, that's fine.
Thank you, Martin. Andrew.
Just asking about the jetty, this is our premier central city connection for tourism from the water. And I don't want to sound too naive, but just looking at the picture, you can see on page 44, you can see that the river gets a lot deeper by going out 2 more metres from the aerial photograph. I take it, we know this river has huge flow fluctuations. I just take it that we have gone deep enough to cater for pretty well any situation, because we're not going to get a second chance at this in the near future, and it's critical that we can get our tourists in and out of the CBD.
It is true that the river can fluctuate significantly, and what we have had to do is take, we consulted with the main user at the moment and talked to them about what they foresee as the need for the depth of the water below their vessel in order to use the jetty appropriately. We believe that we've got enough there. It is caveated though that there will be times in extreme situations when the water will be lower than that. So we cannot put it out so far that it is guaranteed, because we're trying to compromise between or balance the needs of the different users on the river. So we couldn't go out so far that we could have 100% assurance at all times. But it is within the typical operating range.
Could I suggest you just have another look at that?
Certainly.
It's pretty, it just appears on the picture that we're not far off deep water. Deep water, where there's another depth change. You can see the depth changes.
We did do a survey of the base of the river, and it does move and shift over time, so that's also one of the challenges that we have. But the operator was reasonably happy with what we consulted them on with respect to our understanding of the typical water levels and the level of the bottom of the river.
Thank you. I just will ask you just to have another look just to check, because they're not the only operator we're ever going to have, and we didn't specifically build it for that operator.
Correct.
We're building it for the future of our city. So, the NZ, Chris, maybe if I can ask through the chair, Chris, who's probably the most au fait with this, with the slip and with the NZTA subsidy, or possibly you'll know what is the subsidy? How much is NZTA's putting in?
In terms of
percentage-wise?
In terms of rate, 51% is what we're seeking.
So could we have claimed that after we had done the repair? Because it is a matter of high priority that we keep our river walks open.
So NZTA's advice to us is that retrospectively claiming subsidy becomes very challenging in terms of predetermining an outcome prior to the business case and funding approvals being in place to ensure that the right outcome is being delivered from an agency funding perspective. It's something that potentially we could look at further.
It has been closed for a long time, so one of the things that my group is working on with Lance's group is that whole issue, and can we be quicker and more efficient when slips happen? So they are going to happen again because it's a natural environment. So we're just working on some processes and maybe some contracting provisions where we can react a lot quicker. If council wanted to fund up with the funding, we can make it go really quick, but if we want to enjoy the NZTA subsidy, unfortunately we do have to go through an increasingly vigorous process, and retrospective funding is just not their way of doing business. So it'd be really challenging, almost impossible to get retrospective funding. But we are working on that and just how we could get better at our river path management.
And again, if engineering and Lance's department could consider, we've talked about this before, of when a slip does happen, can an open-ended containers go down there for people to walk through to make it safe if there was a slip while they were walking through, to keep our paths open while we go through this process. And we have asked for that in previous meetings and we haven't had any feedback on that, and we probably would like to know if there was a way of actually keeping our paths open and that health and safety, to overcome the health and safety concern.
Yep, look, I'll take an action to make sure, and it'll probably be in the new triennium, to bring a report back on that. In actual fact, that's some of the questions that NZTA are asking about the funding, is just our long-term management of this, so that they don't want to just keep getting requests for funding and fixing slips without an understanding that we've got a management strategy for this. So I'll ensure that we bring it back to the jointly with Lance to the new council very early on.
Thank you. And just one last comment, just to remind elected members around this table that it was elected members who held this job up for as many years as it has, and have pushed back and asked for other reports and have not been satisfied with where we've been heading, and so we have slowed this down, and that's why, Gary, it's been so long.
Are we in debate?
No, I'm just reminding the members around the table of the reason why it's been so long is because we asked for more reports when staff came through with recommendations. So that's why we're still here now with the slip still in place and the walkway closed, or to a large extent that we were involved in that decision.
There are no more questions. Is there any debate? I shall move. Oh, sorry. What are you debating? Okay, yes, okay, yep. Yeah, I'll move it. Paula will second it. Is there any debate? Paula.
I think I just have to put on record my disappointment over the huge difference in cost for the jetty. And I understand what we've been told around the engineering issues and the barge issues. Potentially we knew that the river environment was going to be a tricky one and would involve barge work anyway. To have it so far off is so disappointing, because that puts it in a whole different bracket of affordability. But I'm still very much in support of connecting our central river district, central city river district area, especially the back of the museum, up to our Hamilton Gardens, because I think we need to remember that the Hamilton Gardens is the top performing tourism asset, and plus also loved by locals. And the museum is the second performing asset and also very much loved by locals and visitors. So the connection between those two places, in my opinion, is a no-brainer and must be done. And picking up on Councillor Hamilton's comments about aesthetics, it is important that it, as I've said in the very beginning, that it doesn't just look like any old wooden jetty sticking out into our fantastic river. It doesn't need to be fantastic, but it must be attractive. We only get the one chance to do this, and we should do it right. Not wasting money to do it, but do it expediently and do it right, because Mayor Andrew is completely right. A corridor of the river is always going to be good business for us in the future. It's always going to be what people want to do, to travel along the river. And I foresee in the future not only travelling up down south along the river to the gardens, but travelling up north and connecting with some of our cultural heritage at Ngāru Wahia and the likes. So, you know, we have to get this job done, and I rate it more important than the expansion of Victoria on the river, personally, and I've always said that, so that's no surprise. In respect to London Street slip, which we've all talked about, what can you say? Extremely disappointing. Here we are after almost a whole term of politics, and it's still not remediated, it's still not done. And it wasn't, as Mayor Andrew said, done in the last term either. And I know there were some complications with stakeholders and around that in the very beginning, but I also get approached by the public all of the time. Our river paths are one of the best loved, most used assets in our city, and we've got to get those basics right. There are some other things we could not be doing, but this is not one of them. So it's unlike me to come from a completely negative tack, I'm sorry, but I have to express publicly my disappointment in both of those. Thank you.
What we're doing here is receiving the report, and that notes that the decisions will be made on the Central City Jetty project as part of the financial strategy report. So we're going to more deeply dress into this. Yep, okay. All right, thank you. So Paula has seconded it. Okay, the whole queue of you now. Right, Mark, thank you.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Just further on the slips and the mitigations. Look, I've been a wee bit of a lone voice in this, but I'm going to bang on back to this one. The management, proactive management of our river and potential slips. I'm strongly calling for in the next long-term plan the council to start putting some money aside for being a real leading river city. We are a river city. It will get more costly as the environment changes, and it happens in rivers all over the world. The banks slip in. So I'm calling for river slip mitigation funding in the next long-term plan to continually assess and predict and perhaps prevent future slips, because as we've seen, this is a river path that's taken 2-3 years to get fixed. We had the same thing down in front of Allendale, and look, it's at the moment it's river paths. Next it'll be properties, and that's when we get into serious compensation issues unless we're taking some more proactive moves. So again, I just want to put that in lights for the next long-term plan, that we need to be putting some funding ahead for this. We don't necessarily need to spend it, but if we don't spend it, we will have to spend it in trying to fix what we haven't done in the past. I'd also like to thank staff too, by the way, for their work in keeping the pressure on NZTA regards the Te Awa cycle path. I mean, that is more than just getting the whole thing connected from an aesthetic point of view. I see that as NZTA just finding another excuse to hold back on funding, and so they would. But this is also about getting cyclists off the roads. It's more than just an aesthetic path. It's actually a major part of our cycle network. So thank you for the pressure, and I encourage NZTA to keep on it. Thanks, Gary.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Look, I wasn't going to speak about the jetty now, and I will save most of it for the next one, but I just want to respond, seeing as Councillor Southgate has raised it. I guess I'm speaking in my role as Chair of the River Plan task force, and we do have oversight over this, although the decision to actually approve the 550, I think, was made about 16 months ago before the task force reconvened. But if the task force does continue, or some other committee with oversight, I think we need to have pretty detailed oversight over the future design of it, because I am hearing some questions about that today. So that's fine. Obviously, the cost has gone up significantly, as has been mentioned, from the original estimate that we got from staff and consultants, and we've heard about the reasons for that. I agree it's disappointing. And I also take into account what Chris Allen says. We need to see this in the context of a number of overs and unders that we get, and I can certainly think of some pretty big unders that we've had. I can think of some that Andrew Parsons has delivered in the last year or so, huge ones. My view, and I'll go into it more, is that we do need to approve this additional funding requested today to do this job. It is core infrastructure for a river city to have a jetty in the central city. And we're not talking about something, a massive design piece here. We're talking about something functional that will just do the job. But I'll talk more about that soon. Thank you.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Yeah, I wasn't going to say anything either, but I'm going to I feel obliged to speak up for staff here. As Councillor Taylor said, I'm not on his group, but I go and participate. And we did talk about this, and staff did give us plenty of warning, and we talked about these increased costs bearing down on us. Councillor Bunting, you're not alone in the river slip budget either. I also raised that during the LTP. I remember you and I glancing at each other across the way, and we talked about the possibility of having that as a budget line, but that was left for then. Also, I have to respond to the Mayor's comment about elected members slowing this down. It certainly sounded like that was we were doing that arbitrarily, and we're not. Staff are absolutely the experts in both of these areas, and we're dealing with land and land slips, and we're dealing with water, two incredibly complicated environments to work in, and there is no room to get anything wrong. So I'm also getting, on occasion, I get the odd email from residents saying, when are you going to open the river path? And I understand that frustration, but we're trying to be innovative there. We're trying to do the best for the longest outcome that we can. And I just felt that I needed to support staff on that. And it is our role as governors to keep people of this city safe. And sometimes that takes a little bit more money, and sometimes that takes a little bit more time. And I just also want to say to staff, thank you for the pretty pictures in the report. I thought it was actually really good to see a visual image of a look back on the capital portfolio. I don't know if our whiz Natalie Palmer had anything to do with that. I guess that she probably did. But look, this is really great, and it's certainly great for new candidates to have a squiz at this as well as we go into an election. So thank you for that.
Yeah, so I just want to make it clear, I agree with Angela. I was coming in defence of staff, and staff did come to us with a solution for the slip, and elected members said no. So I just want to make it clear, otherwise this would have been sorted out now and it would be open. So I just want to make it very clear that it was held up through this chamber, and staff did come with a solution that in the end, from my memory, we did go with. But it's been months in between because it was pushed back out of this chamber. I don't see the budget as the issue. Nobody's ever talked about the budget being the issue. The money is there in the system when this type of thing happens, whether you set it aside or whether you bring it through at the time when an unforeseen event happens, has all the same effect on our books in the end. So no one's saying the money's not there when we need to do it. It's a matter of it's a matter of our accounting process. So, thank you.
Okay, we've got a firster and a seconder. Those in favour, please say aye. Those against? There is no one against? Okay, thank you. That's passed, beg your pardon. Right, we're on to item 8, page 45. Oh, sorry. Natalie?
Well, you can still say it.
Okay. Just, We've only been going for an hour. So it won't be, we'll get through this one. Natalie, sorry, I just wanted to express our gratitude for your efforts and work here. And there's that smile again. No, thank you. It has been very much appreciated. And I'm sorry, I have been told where you're going, but I can't remember who it was. God almighty, what are you doing that for? What a waste. All right, thank you very much. And all the best for the future, Natalie. We'll be missing you. Thank you. You're not leaving, are you? Oh, okay. No more speeches. Just wondering, yeah. Okay, off you go, Tracy.
Morena, everyone. So I'm here today to present the annual monitoring report for the year ended June 2019. So just remember, these are provisional results. We are in the middle of doing the annual report as we speak. The auditors will be here with us on Monday, and they spend the whole of August with us. So these results here may differ to the annual report. So just please keep that in mind. Council finishes the year for 2018-19 year with an accounting result surplus of $65.5 million. This is unfavourable to our budget of $76.3 million. And the majority of this unfavourability is due to not receiving as much NZTA capital subsidies that we've heard about earlier on from Chris and Natalie's report. And also just coming through is our losses from our swap liabilities as well. So that's quite a big chunk that comes through at the end of the year. Our balancing the book result, however, did end the year favourably by $6.4 million in surplus against what we had been budgeting to be a $9.4 million unfavourable variance. So this positive movement of the 15.8 was obviously due to more revenue we received in fees and charges and our water rates. We have quite a lot of savings this year in our interest costs. So we had interest revenue and interest expenses where we had some savings. Savings in professional costs. And then because of the deferred capital projects, which you've heard about, there's obviously consequential OPEX that goes with that. So that's obviously a savings coming through this year as well. So as David alluded to earlier, when we're talking about borrowing and debt and the consequences of that, it obviously is a timing variance. So for the first time, we had been forecasting this year to try and figure out what our June result was going to be. So that's a work in progress for us as an organisation, and we'll keep working on trying to get that as accurate as possible. One of the things that we didn't and we don't forecast, or two things actually, is we don't forecast the change in vested assets, and we don't also forecast a change in development contributions. That's really hard to do. Obviously putting the budget together in the first place is quite difficult, and that's obviously the biggest change between what I'd brought to council in May on the March results and the difference with what we've got now. So we had about a $7 million come through just in those 3 months alone from development contributions. That has a big effect on our balancing the books result. So the other thing that came through is we capitalised $26 million of work in progress in June alone. And again, we had been thinking that the in-use date, which is fixed depreciation, would be a lot earlier than what it was, and it wasn't. So that was the other change from a balancing the books result from what we'd been forecasting and the earlier reporting to what we're bringing through now. And then again, just a quick update on our debt. Obviously, again, we were favourable with our debt when we ended the year, and that's all just the cash coming through again from development contributions, our fees and charges, and obviously less spend on our capital projects. So I'm happy to take any questions.
Baffled everyone, Tracy.
Sure.
The report like you've just done, which is very good, that you can paragraph and page number it up for us as you're talking through.
Oh, sure.
Just so that we can follow it through on the report as you're talking through it for next time. Thank you.
Okay, there are no questions. I will move the report be received. what am I supposed to do? You just... Thank you. Any debate? Okay, thank you very much. Those in favour, please say aye. Those against, carried. Thank you, unanimously. Okay, we're now on to the Financial Strategy Monitoring Report. And we might have a coffee break after this one, depending on how long it takes. You've been an hour and 20 minutes. Can't you get through that?
Everyone's been away for a month.
Yeah, I know. Bunch of bloody sooks. What's going on here?
Kia ora, elected members and Mangai Bella. I'm Christy Harder and I'm the Corporate Business Manager. I'm here to present the Financial Strategy Monitoring Report to you today. It's in exactly the same format as we've been presenting throughout the year, and as the two previous reports have alluded, these results that we've factored into the financials are provisional. So please keep that in mind, and there'll be an update coming through in September results.
The reason it's provisional is because these figures haven't been audited yet. That's what
Correct.
we're talking about. Yeah. So that's all that needs to happen. Yeah.
So the changes that have come through, the significant forecast adjustments relate to capital spend and have been highlighted by the previous report. There's also an approval required to come through this report for the additional funding of the Central City jetty. So those are the significant changes to raise. And other than that, I take the report as read. Any questions?
This is where we will be actually formally approving that extra spend for the jetty.
You'll recommend to council.
I beg your pardon? Recommend? Oh.
Yeah. Because Finance Committee doesn't have delegation.
Okay, all right. So beg your pardon. It's this decision that we'll be making that recommends spending the $500,000 back to council. So save your debates for there. Okay. Yep, questions? Yep.
To the extra money for the jetty, where will this money come from?
It'll be additional debt.
Additional debt. So
Yes.
it couldn't be from moving priorities within budget.
The 500 is...
There you go.
The 500 is the additional that would be incurring debt, and there was already funding that would be resolved within the existing budget. So the 500 is on top.
Yes, I appreciate that. I was just wondering whether that couldn't be, rather than additional debt, it couldn't be something else that's deferred or delayed that is less important than the jetty. That's the point I was making, question I was asking.
Okay.
Which I know is a political decision, but
So when it comes to council, it's all over to you in terms of how you treat that.
But I could ask staff to suggest, theoretically, although we haven't got time to do it today, I could ask staff to suggest where they might get the money from, another project that's less important. Do staff ever do that kind of advice?
We don't. Our advice would be coming back to you to say, take a look at the capital projects and which ones don't you want to do, because it's kind of not staff's, it's not in staff's decision-making ability to choose one project over another, because there's just so many different reasons why projects are.
Yeah, no, I get that, but sometimes there's staff insight to, something that might be delayed or deferred, which would have very little impact or something like that. So suggestions can come up, because otherwise we'd all sit and look at all the capital projects and could do any, meeny, miny, mo and pick one that wouldn't work, would it?
No, I understand your point, and we're in the new 10-year plan period, we've implemented a new governance board for staff called the Capital Investment Board. So this topic came through to the Capital Investment Board, and we went through and took a look at it, all our activities, and the decision from the board was that there was no, based on our direction in terms of the projects that we were completing at this stage, there were no additional opportunities. Noting that we had previously brought through savings through the Capital Portfolio Monitoring Report to Council, so in actual fact, you know, in terms of our financial strategy and where it's currently being forecast, it would be taking back, if you like, some of those savings to pay for this.
Okay, so going. I know we could, but the process behind that would be really lumpy, because that'd be like opening up a bag of lollies and saying which colour did you want to take out. That would be really difficult without a process around it. But what you're saying, David, if I heard you, was that you now do have a process in which you can discuss the lay of the land across capital projects. That's good. So in the future, we'll have more agility around that.
Yeah. $1 million in terms of changing savings in one area of our capital portfolio to another to offset, so that it enables us to be more agile and get onto things a lot quicker rather than waiting for committees to get formal decisions. So that came through and was presented by Chris, and what we agreed then would we for council visibility, we would provide a schedule of those decisions so that you would have that in the Finance Committee capital portfolio monitoring report. So yeah, the agility's there, and as I said, the additional 500 would be, if you like, an approval of council because it's unbudgeted, but we've already brought through in terms of our financial strategy savings of well over $5 million, so it would net off that.
Well, that's good, and that's just fortunate for this point in time, isn't it? But yeah, so I'm satisfied now that what you're saying is in future, swings and roundabouts kind of discussions can occur informed by that board, because yeah, I think that's really important for members to have some rationale for moving things around, not just play politics with favourite projects. Thank you.
Christy, I notice on page 85, at the top of the page, you've got your interest rate on debt is forecast at 4.76%. And I presume that's through the LGFA. Are we paying too much on interest rates at the present time when you consider what is available through banks?
Thanks, Councillor Tuman. So the 4.76 that we've got in the report is based on the average interest rate for swaps. Right now, based on our conservative strategy, the swaps were entered into, and we still have a number, and a fairly significant amount invested at those higher rates, which we're waiting, which will be phased out. There's a plan behind that for Treasury. So that also feeds into the conversation around the risk appetite, which we've had discussions around.
Yeah, it just seems to me that the LGFA is not very competitive with the banking world at the present time.
Yeah, Councillor Tuman, if I can just add, we haven't locked in a swap for the last 2 years, so we've stopped entering into swaps. So this is the run out of previous decisions, and on this number, it looks like it's not competitive, but in terms of their rates, they are better they're equal to the rates that our central government can access to. So what has driven this number is the amount and size of swaps we've entered into in the past to give some certainty for the 10-year plan. But we're being more, if you like, aggressive with regard to our borrowings and making sure that we don't lock in to the fixed rates at the moment because we're at historic lows for interest rates. So all of our new borrowing is at a rate that isn't locked in via a swap and is all at the lowest rate possible.
Okay.
Just going to move the motion in case there are any other questions, or
Bella's got a question, I think. Bella.
Kia ora koutou. Just to the team, just on that debt, I guess I can see from the graph the phasing of the fixed rate debt's going to be for the next 2-3 years before it significantly comes down, or what's the timing around when we can expect to really benefit from those low rates?
When we enter into a swap, we enter into long-range swaps that can be over 10 years. So there are a number of them that won't fall off within the 10-year plan, but there are a number that will. So we know that it's falling, and we can forecast what that might look like and provide that information if you like.
That would be good, thank you.
Okay.
If I may, Chair, if the graph on page
I was
81.
going to say, we have got it.
Sorry. The graph on page 81 shows you the rates, the fixed rates, and when it drops off. So if you look at the dark blue, that's basically all of our fixed debt, and you can see how long it goes out for and what we've got. Yeah, so the bulk of it. So what that's basically saying is what we've got fixed. So the bulk of it comes off in 5 years, and then we've just got a few that, one of them we've actually extended all the way out. So we've forward done it to try and get the cheaper rate. So we've just taken out a forward one. But as David alluded to, we haven't taken out swaps now for the last couple of years to try and drop it back. So I think we've got back to 85% fixed, and we were at 95 for quite a long time. So.
Thanks, Tracy.
We have parameters within which you work, eh?
Yep.
Yeah, that's correct. So
which
it
we
ranges, so
approve.
our policy says anywhere from 50 to about 95. We had been at 95 for quite a long time, but obviously as the rates now are dropping quite significantly, as David alluded to, so we've just borrowed money. We haven't taken out any hedging against it. So obviously the more we do that, and then obviously the ones that are already there just will now drop off, and we won't be taking anything new.
And just on that, fundamentally, it's about forecasting what our spend is going to be in terms of understanding our swaps. We never intended to be at 95, but we're actually at 95% because of we're not spending the money that we've said that we would spend in the 10-year plan. So this is really a cash flow discussion, and it's about making sure that we have better accuracy in terms of what our debt needs would be over the 10-year plan, so that we can stay within that bottom end of the range and enjoy the benefits of the current market environment. So we're working with Chris and his team with regard to improving the forecasting. You'll find over local government across New Zealand that it's on average all councils don't spend 30% of what their current capital portfolio is, and so what we're doing is discounting our capital program needs, if you like, for cash down 30% just to create that more certainty and more accuracy in our forecasting.
Andrew.
I commend staff for heading into that bottom range for hedging. It's very obvious we're in a long-term low-interest environment, and with the world market weakening, it appears to be going to stay there. And with what America did overnight, it sort of backs that up. I just wonder whether it's a decision of council to set those hedging parameters. I wonder if a report could come back, possibly even in the Neutronium, on whether 50% to 95% is in this market we're in, whether we could consider moving those indicators at either end, making it, I don't know, possibly from 30 to 70 instead of 50 to 90, and it might be a time to consider that.
Yeah, we're the investment liability policy, which is approved by council. The Treasury policy then takes the information from that. So the 50.
How frequently do we address that?
On a 10-year plan basis.
Yeah.
What the issue here has been is that we're well up at the 95% level, not at the 50%. So council already has the ability to operate at that 50% level, given the current interest rates. The value of getting into swaps is obviously creating some interest rate certainty, so that a 10-year plan doesn't have the volatility that would otherwise be there if you didn't fix your borrowings. But we absolutely should be down at the 50% mark now, not at the 95. We're certainly looking at that. As I say, knowing what your future debt needs are is a big part of that. What you've borrowed in the past and locked into from a swap perspective is just locked in. Obviously, we talked about the fact that none of the liability in the balance sheet will ever materialise, because we're going to hang in those swaps until they mature. But the challenge is making sure that we understand fully how much we need to borrow in the future. So, but very happy to bring back another report and have a more extensive conversation around this in the Neutronium.
Yeah, I think to back up what Leo was saying, it has been frustrating looking at our financials for the last 6 years since I've been around and seeing that even I, who aren't an expert in these fields, could see where it was heading, and we've always been paying at the top end when we take the average, and it's just frustrating to see it.
Sure.
When we know that the mums and dads of the city are paying
Not less.
probably 1% less than,
Yep.
2% less than what we are when we're in a position to borrow at a far lower rate.
And of course, our dilemma is it's all good when it's all good, right? And then if rates go up above our existing swaps, we start being in a better position. But we haven't seen that for some time, which is what you're talking about, and we need to be responsive to that within what we can do. So happy to bring back some a conversation with that.
Okay,
Whether
take it.
that's whether it's a report or a briefing, so we can have a good.
Well, maybe it starts with a
Yeah, we're
briefing,
just
and then we
meandering at the
decide from
moment.
there where to go. Might be a good idea, because
Yep.
I don't want a whole lot of work spent on this. I don't
Sure.
think it needs a lot of. It's a position of the risk we're prepared to take,
Sure.
or the security that we want. So
100%, yep.
It's not something that I see we need a huge report done on. It's a discussion we need to have.
Okay, are there any more questions? Okay, I think, Jeff, were you going to move it? Yeah, I was going to move it. Okie dokie. Do we have a seconder? Okay, Jeff and Paula. Those in favour, please say aye. Those against, moi. I'm not keen on the jetty. Okay, we'll have a... Oh, sorry, beg your pardon.
So was anyone against?
I was.
Gary Dissing.
The motion is carried. Councillor Mallet dissenting. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, we'll go and have, can we be back by 11:20, please? for being late. I was using the clock in our smoker room, and that clock hasn't moved for about 6 months now, has it? Okay, we're on item 10, page 92. This will be fresh in our minds because we had a report from H3 on hang on, I'm going the wrong way here. Waikato Regional Airport thing. My apologies. Okay, page 92. Forget what I just said.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, I just introduced this report. Hopefully it's fairly self-explanatory. As has been signalled before, the airport company is looking to do a fairly major refurbishment project in its terminal, which will also incorporate some build strengthening work in the project. The cost of this is going to be $13 million, and under the terms of the airport's constitution, that is a material transaction that requires the approval of its shareholders, and as you know, we are a 50% shareholder of the business. The other element to seeking approval from you today on behalf of the airport is that they will be taking out additional loan facility to cover the costs. They need a further $3 million to put towards as a loan to put towards the $13 million project itself, and that also requires a shareholder approval. Just as a reminder, however, that under the terms of their statement of intent with us, they are still well within their overall headroom in terms of their debt facility and so forth, and their trading performance remains very, very healthy, as does their balance sheet. So I'm really open to any questions you may have.
You're reasonably comfortable with the economics of this?
Very comfortable.
Okay, can that be recorded in the minutes? Okay, thank you. There seems to be no questions. Okay, happy to Mark? Mark's moving it. I'll second it. Is there any debate? All right, thank you. We'll move to the vote. Those in favour, please say aye. Those against, it was carried unanimously. Thank you very much. Okay, next one. We just want to defer and up. This is the issue with regarding to FPOS and that, isn't it?
Yes, that's correct. A question that had came up in a previous report on H3 about the use of FPOS or the lack of use of FPOS at FMG Stadium came up, and we undertook to come back to this committee to report on discussions with the catering company who does the food and hospitality service work at the stadium, and they are doing some investigations into it, and they would like to come back to us at the Finance Committee meeting in September and to give their position on where they want to head next with that. So this paper really is just a paper to push that agenda item into the next Finance Committee meeting.
I think, Sean, that is should be the 10th of September?
Correct.
Yeah, yep. Okay.
Correct.
Thank you. Okay, sorry, are there any questions? Yes, Mark.
Yeah, Sean, can I just ask why? It just seems a reasonably simple ask of them, and how hard is that investigative work? Because surely they've done this over and over again.
As I've stated previously, they have yet to be convinced that there is both demand for it and also that it can be done in a cost-effective way compared to how they do it now. And we have been pushing back on them on that view. And basically the agreement we've come up with is we presented them with our information on the matter, and they are doing their own investigation of what happens elsewhere in other stadia in New Zealand and Australia to see if their view should be modified on it. So they just are asking for a bit more time, but they are quite concerned that there's issues to do with cost, time and motion of processing people and so forth, but it's a very debatable subject. So they just have asked for more time, but they will come back in September.
Okay.
Andrew.
I don't necessarily buy that. This is very simple. If it's my business, it would have been done within half an hour of the last meeting. I think it's terrible to suggest that it's hard to do an FPOS transaction when you're buying food at the stadium and you make our people and our visitors stand in a line at the far end with 50 to 100 people in the line to process to get cash out to go back to buy food. We're 30 years into FPOS now, 20 years into FPOS. People don't carry cash. And this is 2.5 months, going back to what Mark's brought up. We've asked for this for 2.5 months ago, and we've got nothing. And yes, we know it costs another 1-point-something% a transaction, and there is a small cost, but every other business, this isn't about what other stadia does. Surely this is about what's good for the stadium that we own, that our elected members are a part of. And I can't see how you can't have a report at this stage, and I can't see why you couldn't have a report come back to the 8th of this month with something. Just why is it being taken so long?
As I said, the company has asked for the time so that they can do further investigations. I have given them my views, which mirror yours on the whole matter. It strikes me as, to be blunt, being a no-brainer, but they have some concerns and they reserve the right, or have asked for the right to investigate the matter further. And that's where we're at.
So could I move a motion to have a report back on this for the next council meeting on the 8th of August, if somebody wants to second that? Because this isn't a big job.
Okay, that's a staff report, is it?
Yeah.
If I may, I won't be able to have a report to you by the 8th of August. I won't actually be here myself, and I can't speak.
Sean, I could do this. I can go and talk to Dallas and bring this report back myself within a day. This isn't a hard thing. This is a very, very basic thing we're asking for. And we've had 2.5 months already, and we haven't even got feedback from Montana yet.
Leniency, just to, because I originally moved this motion and have since spoken to the management at Waikato Stadium. Wondering if I could.
Sorry, what?
I originally moved the motion at the last finance meeting.
Oh, yes.
And have since spoken to management at the stadium. Could I maybe just speak to a few things that might alleviate the
So you've got information that would clarify what we're discussing? Yep, sure.
So I also was a bit concerned, hence raising the original motion, and I spoke to Pat Mousup, who's the general manager at Montana, and had a 20-minute frank conversation with them, and had a lot of assurance that they are actually working on a whole bunch of options. It's not just FPOS, but a whole bunch of payless activity, and there's a lot of restriction around the All Blacks games in terms of time frames. They've got to have people out of the seat, be a toilet and back in the seat, and all sorts of dynamics which I hadn't considered. But I had a real confidence that they're going to provide us at the next a date a very comprehensive report. It gave me a lot of assurance. So I do, perhaps Sean could have articulated that better, but there is a lot of work going on behind the scenes. So I'll leave that with you.
So you're saying it's not as simple as Andrew may think?
And my initial assumptions, I've since offline had some very good conversations with them and have comfort that there's some real activity happening there.
Have you had these discussions,
Yes.
General Manager?
Yes, we have had the same discussions with them. We've also presented them with independent reports that we've had prepared on the matter, which suggests that FPOS is the way to go for stadiums. So, yes, we have had those conversations, but they did ask if they could just have some more time to assess their position on it.
Okay, it would be helpful if you'd said that, because you said you were still waiting for them to come back to you.
I'm sorry,
And we've had an elected member now who's filled us in on the background, so I won't go with that motion. I'll wait for the next meeting, but I don't want to see another delay at the next meeting. We want some direction. I mean, we've moved on to Apple Pay and WeChat Pay and other forms of pay now straight off our phones and not even using credit cards, and I certainly hope that that'll be a part of what you're coming back with.
Thank you. Angela?
With respect, Mr Mayor, I think the General Manager was interrupted with questions, so he hasn't able to say what he needed to say. Sean, look, I think the idea is great and it has merit because I don't carry cash myself, but we're not able, this council's not able to tell a private business how to operate that business, are we? Unless it was a condition that we wrote into their contract.
It's correct. There is no specific condition in the contract as it relates to the provision of FPOS or not. There's certainly provision about their delivery of service to market standard and what the market demands and wants. So there is a debate to be had there. But we have quite a symbiotic relationship and a very, very important partnership with Montana that we need to ensure stays good in many respects. So we do have to respect their views at times, and we do push back at times, but we also need to make sure that we have a good relationship going forward. We could not necessarily easily force them to make a decision the way we want it, but we would always be working with them to come to the right decision, and that happens a lot.
Yeah.
Putting this issue aside, but when we have other issues, we do get to the point where we're both happy.
Yeah. Look, that's important. So if the report comes back to council on the 8th of August, and is that right?
Well, I'm hoping for the Finance Committee in September.
Okay, last finance meeting in September. And the outcome isn't what elected members prefer. The next opportunity then would be to look at changing a condition in the contract. I mean, I wouldn't want us to do that because businesses are entitled to, run their businesses as they see fit. But that would be an opportunity in the future. But I think that's a really long time away, isn't it?
Look, well, the contract is the contract as it stands now, but we're always in a position, if you wished us to go to task over the intent of the contract. So if they were to come back and say, no, we're not doing FPOS because, and we were unsatisfied with that, you could certainly ask me to explore other remedies to that situation, which we would do.
Yeah, this is just for this FMG, isn't it? Because Claudelands, they offer?
Yes, so Claudelands, they do FPOS, correct.
Yeah.
It's just FMG. I guess, so that's, FMG is the primary.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
I'm not sure where we're up to. So with this, we've just done questions.
Yeah, so we just need to move and second.
Okay, we just need to, okay, I'll move it. Oh, sorry, and I'll move it. That we've changed the date in the recommendation. Okay, so everyone from your written, it's gone to 10th of September. I'll move. Ryan seconds. Any debate, please? Okay, I'll put that. Those in favour, please say aye. Those against, carried. There's no one against it. That's unanimous. Thank you.
You didn't see me, that's all right.
The ship has sailed. Okay, we're on item 12, H3 quarter 4 report. Sorry, this is the one I started my spiel on. So this will be very recent because we've just had one at the last meeting, haven't we?
That's correct, Mr. Chair. So, look, it's just we were able to prepare the quarter 4 report in time for this meeting, which does come pretty close after the last report. It's effectively our annual report for the financial year for the H3 operation. And as with the other reports you've received today, the figures remain provisional, subject to final audit sign-off. I guess if I could just make a couple of introductory comments to the report, and it's a bit hard because I don't have a lot of new news necessarily from when I reported to you last time at the last meeting on the third quarter report, but at the end of the day, we have had a good, very good operating year. We've had another year where there's been quite a bit of variation in the mix of business that we have. These sorts of businesses or operations don't travel in a straight line with regards to the type of activity that takes place there. We've enjoyed much stronger than anticipated revenue from a number of unforeseen events that have come our way that we've been able to secure, but at the same time they have also impacted on the cost of sale, obviously, but we've been able to hold fairly healthy margins against that new business that we hadn't previously been expecting. We've been able to contain our costs reasonably well. It has been at some cost to the team, and I have to acknowledge the staff effort, especially with a lot of long hours and a lot of overtime. But we have been able to contain our costs. But where we haven't been able to contain costs to my satisfaction is where we have been staging founders-style events in the arena, which just comes at a lot of extra cost to us, but it is a valuable thing for us to deliver for the city, in my view. We've hosted over 550,000 people over the year at the H3 venues. It's spread across 1,200 individual events of some kind, and that's also spread across around 1,000 hire days across the 3 venues. We have some notable physical projects or capital projects that have been taking place. The topical one is the new lights at Seddon Park, the new cricket lights. Construction on that started. It's well underway. For those of you who haven't seen it, there are some very big, ugly holes at the moment. The new lights themselves are in storage at Claudelands, and that project is going to plan. We've also had the new Chiefs Hospitality Suites, which is funded by the Chiefs, installed, and they're starting to look good. They've had quite a number of teething problems with the supply of the suites and the installation of them that has delayed it, but they're looking pretty good, and we're now working on the history board that's being co-funded by FMG, which will sort of add value to the Chiefs' work that's happening there. During the year, I guess the most high-profile event that we had was the Hsbc Rugby Sevens, outside of some of the mega conferences that tend to be a little bit invisible. And once again, the Rugby Sevens was a big success, and we feel we even did better than we did the first year. Planning is well underway, of course, for 2020, for the third Sevens in a row that will be coming to us. In terms of what's coming up, we have two major events in the first quarter of the year that are once again quite topical. The International Darts Competition, that'll deliver around 3,500 to 4,000 people in the Claudelands Arena for the 2 days of that event. And as we speak, whilst we've got a Kiwi Kids competition taking place on Friday night in Claudelands Arena, we're actually setting up within that setup for Disney on Ice, which will be a series of performances starting late next week, and we'll have over 20,000 people going to those shows. To give you an idea on Disney on Ice, it's actually bigger than last time, very different to last time. We are hanging 2.5 tonne of truss in the roof that will be positioned in a way so that we can hang a further 20 tonne of equipment off those trusses. So for our tech services guys, it's been a challenge, but they love it. So they're all in a bit of a buzz because they're doing something a bit beyond, and there's some special tracking that's going up, which you'll only know about if you go to the show. So with that, I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you. Thank you, Sean, for that report. And I do love the pictures, and some of them speak 1,000 words. So I've just got a few questions. And one of them is, I was looking, and I thought I saw it, but the rods for the light towers in the FMG Stadium, how much are they to replace, the tie rods? Not that I know what that is.
I don't think I could give you that figure offhand, but to fully replace them would be substantial. But we're doing sort of repair and remedial work on them so that we can extend their life. But I'm sorry, I can't answer that question off the top of my head.
No problem. The other question is about the turf replacement at FMG Stadium. How often do we do that? Because, I mean, it's quite a substantial cost.
Yeah, that's generally between 8 and 10 years that we do that. So we're, I think, around a year overdue from doing it against our schedule. And yes, it's 1.3 million, but it's normally factored in, and all stadiums do that. So it'll be a very busy job. That work will start the day after the last game, so that we're up and running again in time for Sevens.
Okay, thank you. And the last question I've got, and look, I do love what you're doing with sustainability and recycling. Great work there. because I've been banging on against it since I came into council. But I'm just a little bit challenged with, and it, again, pictures speak 1,000 words, that the picture of the three bins that we've got there. Look, I mean, I know most people are very clever, but still can't figure it out where to put their rubbish. So, and to me, plastic and metal means very little. So is it cans? Is it, you know, is there some way of putting pictures to it that people actually exactly know what goes into these bins?
Yes, I think you'll find that the actual canisters that are going to be used are a bit different to this, and there will be.
Okay.
But having said that, we have had temporary overlays on our existing bins in place now for the rubbish, and that has had instructions on, but we still have to have staff posted at the bins so that we can help direct people into the right place. And I'll be honest, I have times when I go to some of these bins and I'm not quite sure where to put things. You know, and so so it can be a challenge. Part of the challenge with that, if I may add to it, is that everyone around the country is doing it in a slightly different way.
I know.
If everyone everywhere had the same colour bin with the same instructions for the same purpose, I think we'd all get used to it. But unfortunately, there's so many variations out there, which is a bit of a challenge.
Maybe that has to go to LGNZ next year to have the bins all the same.
Well, it's not just us; it's private companies as well. It's hotels. It's any. It's you know.
Okay. Well, thank you so much for that.
Thank you. Just looking at the financial summary on page 105. Just in terms of, because it always attracts interest, we know that it runs at an operating deficit, but brings other results to the city. Am I reading that right, that the operating deficit was greater this year than last year?
Yes, that's correct. So if you so we had a budget of 6.5 million operating deficit for the H3 venues, and we came in at 5.3, but that was still well ahead of the 4.7 from the year before, and that was driven by a number of additional costs that we were incurring with maintenance of property and equipment that came through, keeping the lights going at Seddon Park, for example, which was expensive. We've also had some big cost increases that have hit us, but we've contained it against our budget in terms of compliance costs and everything else, which are just going up and up and up. So against our budget, we've contained ourselves reasonably well, but certainly on the year before, it hasn't been, you know, we've just had costs that were unavoidable, unfortunately.
So if I've got that right, the lights, because they are inefficient lights, cost more?
Yeah, to keep them operating, we had to do quite a bit of work just to replace fittings and bulbs and electrical work and so forth. We've also had a fair amount of work done on the replacement of a chiller or air conditioning unit at FMG Stadium, which cost us a lot of money in this financial year, now being resolved in that, but there was just quite a big maintenance bill.
So we should hope not to see that similar trend into the next year?
The trend will continue as things age. There's no doubt about that. But hopefully our budgeting will be much better on that front. But these things don't travel in a straight line, as I said before. You know, you do have years that will always be a little bit more expensive than a previous year, or vice versa. It depends on what's happening with particular activity.
And the compliance costs, can you give me a bit more? Who's compliance with what, health and safety? What?
Yeah, health and safety, electrical checks, inspections, all sorts of things, legal work that goes with that, certifications and that.
And most of that is contracted out, not done in-house?
Bit of both, yeah.
So
mostly out of house, but bit of both, yeah.
So the costs are being driven by out of house more than in-house?
Yeah, the cost is being driven by the requirements that we've got to meet.
Okay, thank you.
I love these little debates. Starting off by saying that you weren't here when all this stuff was done and built. But just going through the Clauden's result, we have spent $6.5 million to get $4.1 million. The stadium, we have spent $5,900,000 to generate $3 million. And the overall summary is we've spent $12.5 million to get $7,100,000. So can you, and that's just straight operating costs, that's not with overheads. So where are the areas that we can work with you, you can recommend to us where we can improve those operating results? Is it revenue generation or is it cost reduction?
Look, we will always be working hard on cost reduction, but these are very expensive assets to maintain and to keep at the condition that we're required to keep them at. So you can only achieve so much on cost. The real gain is if we can get volume and utilisation. So that's in revenue, if we can get to do more things. Now, the venue that we have the greatest opportunity to do that is Claudelands. So we have a lot of space at Claudelands. We have a lot of peaks where we're incredibly busy and have events knocking up against each other, but we also have troughs. And if we can do more work to get more business into those down periods at Claudelands, that's where the revenue can stick much better to the bottom line. But if you talk about venues like Seddon Park for cricket, which is totally purpose-built for cricket, there's just no opportunity for additional revenue there. And I can't see any opportunity for cutting costs whatsoever. And that's driven by the very specialist nature of the facility, and it's limited to doing only certain things. And it's also driven by the contracted arrangement we have with Northern Districts Cricket, which limits our ability to earn money.
Because in the old days, in the old days, we used to play hockey tests there. I've seen rugby league tests at Seddon Park, but obviously now it's no longer as flexible as it used to be, and it's
not if we have a contract that obliges us to operate at an international cricket standard and to have a lot of other sports codes like rugby league on the cricket wicket. It just wouldn't work. So we have a similar issue with FMG Stadium. Most days you go to FMG and you'll see we've got other meetings taking place in the meeting rooms. There's always things going on, but it's not enough income to overcome the cost of maintaining a 26,000 seat stadium primarily designed to allow people to watch rugby games. And so once again, the ability to eat into both the cost structure and the revenue structure for that facility being special purpose built is very limited. The best we can do is to try and keep those costs down as low as we can.
The common sort of vibe around FMG is that it's really expensive for people to use. Is there any, you'd have the club rugby final there, which is a H3 basically donate it for that. Is there nothing we can do to reduce? And I guess you've already answered this. There's nothing to do to reduce the operating cost. Of course, and that doesn't even generate any revenue, does it?
No, the expense that people talk about is if they have an event there and they need to have security, they need to have cleaning and everything else. That's what really costs the money, or special services. So on one hand, people want to use the stadium and all its facilities and everything it can deliver, but it costs money, and it's the overlay on top of what we provide as council that they struggle with, because they don't have the income themselves to cover that cost. So it is challenging for community users, but it's challenging for their schedules anyway to mix it with other activity that's going on when we talk about Waikato Rugby or the Chiefs or that higher level.
So
sport.
in the situation in FMG Stadium, for example, when you're hiring out rooms, do we make an operating profit on that?
Oh yes, yeah, absolutely. But it's nowhere near enough to offset the cost of maintaining the rugby turf or the stadium.
Okay, so the cost of someone doing a presentation, and I've been to presentations up there,
absolutely.
actually is greater than the cost of having to get someone to open the doors and all that.
No, absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And that's our intention, is to sell as much as we can there so that we can get as much revenue as we can. But Don't forget, like Seddon Park, the arrangements that we have with rugby at FMG Stadium puts a lot of the revenue opportunity back into rugby. So we don't get to necessarily keep it ourselves.
Oh, I got
you. You know, with sort of advertising around the perimeter, with you know, another sort of arrangement. So it's a very challenging model, and it's not unusual. It's normal, but it is part of the decision people take when a city takes when if it wants to deliver this sort of facility for its people.
Okay, thank you. Siggy.
May indulge me, Chair. Just about talking about that model that we've got, with all the other community playgrounds, we're asking the community to fund a third of it. Have we ever asked, or can we change the model with cricket and rugby to ask them to actually pay a third as well towards the cost?
Well, look, first of all, if you look at FMG, and it's a long time ago, and I don't know all the details off pat, but the community did put money into the build of that stadium. I mean, council put the lion's share in, obviously, but community did put money in, and I think the same can be said for Seddon Park with the original build.
Okay.
But as I said before, from an operating basis, on an annual basis, we have contracts in place with cricket and contracts in place effectively with rugby, which really preclude us from changing the model. Okay. We also have to be eyes wide open that they couldn't afford it. They don't have the money themselves to put more than what they do in. It's a reality of sport at that level in New Zealand.
Okay, thank you.
Just one further question, because this comes round and round and round, this particular debate about stadiums and big facilities. Do we have, and you have said in the past, am I right, that there is no other similar event centre like Claudelands in the country, apart from Sky City, that runs at a profit? Is that right?
Look, it's when I say there's nothing else like Claudelands in New Zealand, what I'm referring to is there's no other facility that has a major exhibition centre, a major conference centre, and a large arena all on one site. If you go to other cities, they're generally dispersed all over the show, which gives and being all on one site gives us an advantage, and that's why I say that's unique. Everywhere else has it. The only convention centre or major convention centre really is Sky City in Auckland. That is privately owned and operated, but it's based on and it's not for me to talk about their numbers, and I don't actually know the detail of their numbers, but it's based on a leverage model. Sky City does an awful lot of other things that enable it to fund some parts of its business that don't necessarily make money in its own right. But because it draws in other benefits to those other parts of the business, it makes it a sound proposition. We don't have that benefit. The city does, businesses in the city do, the community does if you put a value on the social benefit that they derive from it. But we don't have that direct commercial benefit like Sky City does, because it's got hotels, it's got restaurants, it's got bars, it's got gaming, it's got everything else, and anything to attract more and more people into their precinct. That's where the benefits come from for them. But in terms of other convention centres around the country, they are not making money, and they are funded just the same way as Claudelands is funded.
Okay, it would be interesting to see some of that at some stage, because we have talked about that before. Just in terms of we all want to reduce that amount of money that this fabulous facility loses each year. We do want to reduce. In your view, what can be done to bring some reduction to that? What's going to add value to that business? New hotel nearby? Restaurant underneath? Whatever. What's going to be something that's going to? Because it's just.
I was trying to get the same, and I'm not trying to knock you out, but I know we have got a pretty tight schedule, and I think that was the question I asked, but you were asking in a slightly different way. But
okay, well, I'm happy to have it come back another time.
I'll be fast, Mr. Chair. Hotels. We need a hotel. It's as simple as that. We are turning business away, or business isn't coming to us because we do not have enough hotel rooms. We're turning away 1,000-strong conferences because we don't have enough rooms. People actually want to come. So the biggest thing we need is more hotel rooms. But having said that, the sheer volume of business that a place like Claudelands can generate in its own right, and it's by itself, is not the number that will make a hotel development viable. There has to be so much more to it than just a convention centre or major events that happen. So it's just part of the mix. But from the convention centre point of view, our lack of hotels is our biggest problem.
Thank you.
Thanks, Paula. Martin? Quick.
And that reminds me, around Claudelands where you do own some properties in the adjacent, is there any general update? I realise this is a public session.
The land that's on the other side of Brooklyn Road, we own. That's Jen Beard's area that looks after that in strategic property. I am aware that there has been some interest in that property lately by some other parties, but I don't know that it's gone anywhere. It's just people have been phoning with inquiries.
Just through the chair, it would be really good in the pink session from time to time, just to keep us because obviously we've had discussions, keep us an update status, because clearly the way Claudelands is linked to accommodation and then linked pedestrian-wise to the CBD,
correct,
etc. It's important. The question I have is, can we just remind ourselves, from memory, the FMG Stadium, that did attract some Waikato District funding for its capital build?
Look, I cannot answer that question with authority. I really don't know. I could find out for you and let you know, but I'm not sure.
Claudelands, I don't think did.
No, Claudelands, my understanding, was 100% funded by Hamilton City Council.
Could we? I think what would be good in future, Mr. Chair, is just when we've talked about other facilities, and I'm thinking of the Wellington Cape Tin, I'm thinking of the covered stadium in Dunedin. It'd be really good to just remind ourselves which neighbouring communities or help fund those facilities, because they are essentially regional. And this is again coming back to the old footprint. And I'm a cracked record. But if you're a ratepayer in Frankton, you pay for these. If you're the multi-million-dollar ratepayer just across our boundaries with my good friends in the T suburb of Hamilton, Tamahiri, you don't. And all I'm wanting to do is keep reminding ourselves about a comparator. Obviously, Auckland has a whole lot of facilities with the super city, large geographic area. Dunedin's a large area in its own right. Do you have any? Is that information presumably is easy to get? I'm just wanting, because the reason it comes back to again, the regional council stepping up to the plate, which it failed to do by one vote, around the regional facilities fund. This is just the classic. I know the issues you raised, Mr. Chair. Absolutely can see that. But this is just the classic of two facilities which are great facilities, which a narrow set of ratepayers and residents get to pay for, and a whole swag of residents and ratepayers on the fringes in central Waikato don't. And it just, earth to base, we have to pursue this. And I'm wondering, perhaps just through the chair, it would be actually good if you could just do an appendix in future, or just, it would be good just to get just to circulate to us, the major comparative facilities and how they are funded. That's all.
Sure. In the case of Forsyth Bar and Dunedin, it was Dunedin City Council with a small contribution from the Otago University. And okay.
Yeah.
That's good info, but
just a general.
Okay.
It'd be good to get a general summary.
Sure.
Because obviously in the bigger picture discussion we will have. Thank you. Thank you.
Is there any more questions? All right, I'll move the report be received. Do I have a seconder? James. Those in favour? Oh, sorry. Do you want to beg your pardon?
Just very quickly. Sean, thank you for what you're doing. You're in a heck of a position. It's a very hard thing to quantify the exact benefits of the facilities you manage. But I just want to reinforce by way of a very short story of something I saw your staff do recently, that what you're managing is more than just the facilities. You've got a great team there. The New Zealand Brass Band Champs were in town recently, and it was the first time we'd had them in about 20 years, and it was a massive event. Not one that, a lot of people would think was as big as it was, and it was the biggest one they've ever had in the country. There was a day, I think it was a Wednesday or Thursday, and one of the biggest events that the brass band has is like a parade where they umpire down Barton Street, and it's really big part of that calendar. The weather turned on us, and it was absolutely hideous. Within 1 hour, the Claudeland staff were able to free up some room and make Claudelands available for that march, and that was really significant. And those people are hugely grateful, and I was extremely proud of how quickly the staff turned that around. So, could you please pass my thanks on anyway to the staff, because you're managing a great team, and they were super flexible, and they did Hamilton proud that time. So, yeah. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Mark. Martin?
Councillor Bunting, very good reminder, and notwithstanding some of the broader deep discussions we have about capital projects, about regional funding around other neighbouring funding like Mystery Creek, other neighbouring facilities like Mystery Creek, what I think we do continue to need to underscore is that these facilities, in terms of the staff and the professionalism that wrap around them, is second to none. And I totally acknowledge the financial issues that our chair continues to raise, but I do think we need to convey how proud we are of our team, and the recent brass band thing is just but one of the many examples of incredible service. Thank you.
Thank you, Paula.
Comments, but also I know that this is all an issue that gets battered around, especially, of course, in an election year, because it's something that doesn't draw in lots of good money, surplus anyway. But I know you put a lot of business through that stadium all of the time, and what would Hamilton be like if we didn't have, where would those events go? Of course, Claudeland stepped into a gap that the closure of Founders brought to us, but in addition, the range of events that you have there is amazing. I think the roof is going to be lifted off with the darts tournament coming up shortly, and I hope we prove that we can host darts and get it again, because it's a big movement. But in respect to that, I just acknowledge that every time I have asked you how we can improve business through Claudelands, the word hotel comes up. And every time I talk about a hotel with someone, they're talking about the economics of bed nights in the city. They need enough people most of the time to fill the beds to make it worthwhile, because they're expensive to build. So this is something I believe the City Council, along with the business community, need to wrap our head around really very soon. Otherwise we're missing out. We're missing out on conventions as we speak now. We're missing out on business. Business is walking away to go elsewhere. So I'll just make the point to Council that it's not just about Claudelands, it's about a suite of offerings that we have. It's about the river plan being progressed. It's about
we're getting off
adding value to
that
tourism.
Mandate now, so
No,
that'll be due. Thank you.
I'm not, and I've still got time to debate.
You do it to me plenty of times, so you can. Here's right back at you.
All right.
Okay.
Fine.
You're not adding anything to the debate.
My point
We've
was
heard it
that
from
we need
everyone
a
around the
suite
place.
of things to support the stadium.
Okay. We've got a mover and a seconder. Have we? No. Okay. I'll move. Mark can second. No, well, that was debate we were in then. Yeah. So we do have a mover and a second.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah. Okay. All right. We'll just go straight to the vote. Those in favour, please say aye. Those against, carried. Thank you. Okay, we're now at the end of the open agenda. I'll move the resolution to exclude the public. Can I have a seconder? Thank you. Those in favour, those against, carried. Thank you very much. We'll now move into the